With Stalker 2 dropping, as well as Flight Simulator, I think has experienced this as well. I think reviews are outdated. That's just it. I think that we have to find a better way to do reviews. This is something that we've talked about on this channel before, especially surrounding games like Starfield, where it was just super easy to review bomb it. It didn't seem like, there seemed like a definite disconnect there. This has popped up again under Stalker 2, and there's a headline over at purexbox.com talking about this. There's a developer, an ex-Arkane developer, talking about Metacritic scores and how the current system we have doesn't incentivize taking risks. And I think it's absolutely correct. I think there's some good points here, but how do we solve that? And how do we solve reviews? Let's go over that today. Let's talk about it. But before we do, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. My name is X1 the Gamer. We also have a podcast, X1 Daily. That's X1 Daily. A note on the podcast side, there's a few days that we've not been able to upload the podcast. This is on Spotify's side. We use Spotify to upload all of our podcasts, and they've just been down. So that's why if there's a day missed there, that is why. I'll try to be more transparent and put it on the YouTube channel or my Twitter when that is indeed the case from here on out. But stay tuned for that. This is also our last video of the week because it's Thanksgiving. I'll be traveling. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Hope you guys enjoy your holidays and have a, be thankful. I'm excited for the future, so it's going to be good. But let's jump into this news story. This is over at purexbox.com, and then we're going to go through the tweets here, and I agree with this. Full disclosure, I agree with this. Before we go over the details, tell me your impressions right off the bat in comments. Do you think reviews are fair? Do you think they're unfair? Do you think that they are outdated? I think they're outdated, and I just don't think that they work in 2024 for a myriad of reasons, and we'll get into that. Particularly, I'm going to use Flight Simulator because I've not jumped into Stalker 2 yet. I mean, I've jumped in, but very briefly, and I experienced no issues on the tech front there. On Flight Simulator, I've played much more of that. By the way, I'm hooked on Flight Simulator, absolutely loving it. But let's jump into this. So Stalker 2's lower review scores are unfair and misleading, says Arkane founder. It's a bit rough on the edges at launch. It's safe to say that Stalker 2's reviews have been quite varied so far. We went with a lower score of 4 out of 10. This is purexbox.com. Due to a litany of bugs, glitches, and game-breaking issues experienced during our review time, but plenty of other critics went higher. This has led to a somewhat middling Metacritic average for the game, and Arkane Studios founder Raphaël Colantonio has taken issue with that. I actually agree. I think 4 out of 10. I was surprised when I saw it from Pure Xbox. I think 4 out of 10 is way too low. A 4 out of 10 is a terrible game. The problem is what do you want people to do if the bugs are broken? I mean, if there's bugs that at launch when you're reviewing the game are game breaking, it makes it very difficult. Yet 1 week later, for instance, they had a huge day one patch. They had like 48 hours later, they had a few more patches that fixed many of the issues that my brother and I was watching my brother play. We're sitting there going through stuff. Day one, way bigger issues. Day two, some slight glitches, but definitely nothing game breaking on day two. But reviews had already dropped for that. So what do you do in that situation? Should you hold off? Should you wait? Should there be a 1 week moratorium on everything for you to get your stuff together here? I mean, the answer from the cynical would be, well, you need to drop your game, with all these bugs fixes at release. I think the other thing is maybe you do open betas for it, especially in technically complex games like a Stalker 2 is, like a Flight Simulator is. It's definitely a conundrum, and it's a problem just in that a 4 out of 10 from purexbox.com 1 week later is completely irrelevant. That 4 out of 10 is now inaccurate. I think reviews should go back 1 week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, and update their scores because that's just inaccurate at this point. It really is. The same with Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's something similar happened to it. Anyways, let's continue. Posting on social media recently, the former Arkane dev claims that, quote, safe boring games, unquote, are likely to score higher for being, quote, polished at launch, and that this in turn puts game studios off from taking risks. Colantonio then uses Stalker 2 as an example of a game that has apparently scored lower than those safe games just because it's, quote, a bit rough around the edges at launch. Here's the post in question. Now, this is from Raphaël Colantonio. The Metacritic ecosystem encourages devs to make safe, boring games. As long as a game is polished at launch, you're guaranteed an 80%, no matter how boring the game might be. Meanwhile, Stalker 2 gets a 73 because it's a bit rough around the edges at launch. Unfair and misleading. I agree. I agree with that. I do think it's unfair and misleading. Now, those that are countering this would say, well, wait a minute. When we review the game, it's bugged. And you're right. You're right. I'm right. He's right. Everybody's right in this situation. I think we got to look at alternatives for reviews here. And I think we got to figure out a fair system that takes all these things into account. Because once again, in the world that we live in and how complex games are, there are going to always be some issues at launch. That's just the reality. How do we get to a place that, and in the case, I'm going to use pure Xbox. I'm not saying that pure Xbox is wrong here. I'm just saying that their 4 out of 10, it may have been a 4 out of 10 when they played the game at launch, is now inaccurate. 1 week on, it's now inaccurate. Or 2 weeks on now. It's an inaccurate score. It just is. And so how do you account for that? Because the updates were able to roll out so quickly. Most of those glitches have been addressed. It's much better positioned today than it was. Same with Flight Simulator. Flight Simulator at launch, you had to queue up. There were issues because it's all in the cloud. So if you were to review on day one and drop your review and go in and review bomb it on Steam and stuff, that would have been an issue. Maybe it's up to review sites. Maybe it's up to Steam. You cannot leave a review on a game until the game has been out for 1 week or 48 hours, or maybe they time frame it. So for instance, like maybe there's a rolling 48 hours to 72 hours, or maybe a rolling 5-day score in that reviews left on day one eventually work them way out, because now you're only counting reviews, from day 2, 5 days in the future. Does that make sense? So it's constantly rolling, and then you're getting always the most updated reviews there. Like a review, I'll give another example. Cyberpunk 2077. Now, I know that's a little bit different of a situation because you've had DLCs, and so you tend to review DLCs separately. But when you look at that game in its entirety in 2024, should the reviews of that game when it originally dropped count still? And the answer is no, of course not. It doesn't make any sense. So how do you take that into account? I think some kind of rolling review system is, as we're talking, I think that maybe now that's not a perfect system either, because you could game that system. So how do you maximize accuracy and minimize the opportunity for players and people with bad intentions to minimize that game system? But I think that would be a step in the right direction, because like I said, 48 hours into Flight Simulator, your day one reviews would be inaccurate. And that is mostly negative on Steam, Flight Simulator, and is now mixed reviews. Why? Because the experience has improved for people. And so those original reviews, why should they still show up? Answer, I'm not sure that they should. I think that reviews should represent a snapshot in time, because games and the way that we can support games and their need to always be online, especially like, for instance, with an MMO or Flight Simulator, which is basically taking an MMO mechanic, i.e. you're only downloading 11 gigabytes on a Flight Simulator and then everything else is streamed from the cloud, which I think is genius, and also has worked fantastic for me so far. Not been everyone's case, though. Let's see what Pure Xbox has to say about Mr. Colantonio's post here. They say, while we sort of see what the developer is getting at here, we do think the situation is a lot more nuanced than this. Which is no surprise for a social media take, is it? Yeah, it's true. Colantonio does go on to reply to some responses, adding that it's a complex issue overall and that there are exceptions to this way of thinking. The Arkane founder also brings up how low review scores can cling to games even when they're patched 3 months later, going on to question whether the current way most of us review games still makes sense. It's certainly a complicated topic and one that a lot of us will have opinions on. Here's one of his replies that they're posting here in the article as well. Someone replies to them and says, "What a weird thing to complain about. Yes, a game that works is going to have a better score, while one that doesn't, a lesser score." Colantonio responds to this and says, "A game with no bug has better score than a great game with bugs. Makes sense to you? It means the essence of the game is not taken into consideration. It means that 3 months later, when the great game is patched, it still has a shit score. Does that make sense to you?" I agree with him. I think having some sort of rolling score system is the answer here. Honestly, I think scores are snapshot in time. And then what you could do if you're a Metacritic is you could apply a like a timeline at the top. So let's say Stalker 2 is out. You have Stalker 2. Here is the review on this day. And you have the current score, and that score could change. You could look at that score on day one and then look at that score a week later, and that score could change because the reviews are rolling, which means if you are an outlet, you need to be constantly updating your scores. And if you don't, we don't count your review. You don't get our publicity, et cetera, et cetera. It also probably then leans more heavily on user reviews, as I think it should, to be perfectly honest. But it means that you're forcing rolling reviews there. And then what you could do is, if you have Metacritic, let's use Metacritic as an example. You have Stalker 2, you've got the review score there, you've got the information about Stalker 2, and then up above it, maybe you have a timeline of the review score, so that you're then giving context to players as well. So you can see like, oh, on day one, there must have been bugs or something. And maybe you put patches, you show, hey, when games were patched. That may take a lot of work. I'm sure there's a way to automate that. But you could show, like, on day one, this game was a 41. By day 3, it was now being rated at 80s, 90s, 100s. You know, and you could show you, and it could go the other way too, especially with DLC or live service games. Like season 1 was fantastic. Season 10, it really dropped, and then it's constantly rolling, and you're seeing these things that would then enable you to review seasons in games as well, because that's something that doesn't happen either. Like, we don't actually get reviews for instance, Fortnite season in and season out, even though one season may be amazing and one season may suck. Or Apex Legends, or Call of Duty Warzone, or anything like that. What we do is we get one static review, and then nothing happens beyond that. So I do think rolling reviews is an answer there for sure. So shout out to Raphaël Colantonio. Here's his Twitter right here. Make sure you go give him a follow. Seems like, in fact, let me give this dude a follow. Let me give that dude a follow there. I'm going to like his post because I think that he's 100% correct. Here is Azario. Now, Azario responded to his original quote here on Twitter from Noisy Pixel News. And here's what he said. We held off on our review. The developers emailed us every other day with full transparency on what they were fixing and what they had left leading up to the launch. This has happened before, but I think that transparency is important, and reviews should be open to holding those reviews. Reviewers should be open to holding those reviews. However, sites are chasing clicks, and these larger websites need day one coverage to be a resource. It's true. If you're making a video and you drop, even on my channel, if I'm the first one to talk about something, I get tens of thousands of views versus thousands of views. You know what I mean? So first, especially in the review game, if you've ever done a review video or a review write-up, if you are first, you can just capitalize on that audience. So that creates a problem as well, which is why, again, I think having rolling scores is the answer here. These larger websites need day one coverage to be a resource. Sometimes they don't have budget for their reviewer to do a review in progress and a review. So we get these Metacritic scores that will forever reflect the game at launch. The scores can't be changed either. However, you also have scores for the sake of scores. Spider-Man 2 launched with so many bugs, but the scores showed 9s and 10s. Our reviewer gave it a 7 and the community tore us to pieces for it. In our minds, a game with that budget should not have launched in that state. So it's all nuanced. I'd love to maybe connect with you to call for a couple statements and pick your brain on this topic. Azario says, again, it's nuanced, it's complicated, but I think the common consensus here, whether you're pure Xbox, whether you're Mr. Colantonio here, whether you're myself or you know, as a gamer here sitting here, I think we can all agree that review scores are outdated. The way that reviews are taken into account, and in a constantly online world, it's a snapshot in time, and what we need is something better than a snapshot in time. We need something that is more holistic than these snapshots in time. So we're going to end that here for today. Would love to know what you guys think. What solutions do you have? Let me know in the comments below. But again, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. If you're listening on podcasts, apologies that we weren't able to get previous episodes up this week. All episodes should be there now. This is our last video of the week, so happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Happy holidays. Have a great rest of your week. We will be back next week. It's almost 2025, and I'm stoked for 2025. If you like what we're doing, like, subscribe, become a member. We're going ham in 2025, so have a great rest of your day, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.